Elena walked into Marcello's Italian restaurant at 5 o'clock in the evening. She tied her white apron around her waist and checked her uniform in the mirror. Everything looked neat and clean. Her black pants were pressed and her white shirt was spotless. She had worked at Marcello's for 3 years now, and she knew the restaurant well. The red brick walls, the soft lights from the chandeliers, and the smell of fresh pasta and tomato sauce made the place feel like home to her. "Good evening, Elena," said Marco, the head chef. But Elena's mind was not on work tonight. She had bills to pay and a small apartment to keep clean. She needed this job. She was a good worker, always on time, always polite to the customers, and she never complained, even on busy nights. Around 7 o'clock, a group of 5 men arrived at the restaurant. They were loud and laughing before they even sat down. Elena could tell from the way they dressed that they were rich. They wore expensive suits and gold watches. They looked like the kind of men who had never been told no in their lives. The men ordered wine and expensive food. They spoke loudly, telling jokes that made them laugh harder than anyone else in the restaurant. Elena was assigned to serve their table. She carried a tray with their drinks carefully. There were 5 glasses of Coca-Cola on the tray, cold and fresh from the kitchen. As she bent down to place the first glass on the table, one of the men, a tall man with blonde hair named Vincent, suddenly moved his arm. "Watch this," Vincent said to his friends, laughing like a small child. He reached out and pushed Elena's arm. The whole tray fell. Coca-Cola flew everywhere. The cold, dark liquid poured down Elena's white uniform. It soaked her shirt and her pants. The sticky liquid dripped down her legs and into her shoes. Elena gasped. The cold shock made her step back. For a moment, she could not move. She just stood there covered in Coca-Cola while the men at the table laughed louder than before. "Oh, come on. It was just a joke," Vincent said, still laughing. His friends slapped the table and laughed until tears came from their eyes. Other people in the restaurant turned to look. Elena felt her face turn red. She felt shame wash over her like the Coca-Cola that covered her body. She wanted to cry, but she did not. She was a professional. She had learned to keep her feelings inside. "I am very sorry, sir," she said quietly, even though it was not her fault, even though she had done nothing wrong. "Sorry?" another man said, laughing. "This is the best thing that has happened all week." Elena picked up the pieces of the broken glasses from the floor. Her hands were shaking. The other waiters watched her, and she could see pity in their eyes. That was worse than the laughter somehow. The pity made her feel small. She walked to the back of the restaurant without saying another word. In the staff room, she took off her wet uniform with shaking hands. She dried herself with paper towels, but she was still cold. She still smelled like spilled Coca-Cola. She had a spare uniform in her locker, a clean one. She put it on slowly, trying to calm herself down. Elena looked in the small mirror in the staff room. Her eyes were red, but she had not cried. She was proud of that. She did not give those men the satisfaction of seeing her tears. She took a deep breath and walked back onto the floor. The men at the table were still laughing and talking about the accident. They had already forgotten about Elena. They were ordering more food and wine. They were having fun, making jokes about what had happened. Elena finished serving their table that night, even though every smile she gave them hurt. She brought them more wine, more food, more Coca-Cola. The men did not look at her or say sorry. They did not even seem to notice her anymore. They just kept laughing and enjoying their night. When their dinner was finished, they left money on the table for the bill. The tip was small. They did not leave extra money to say sorry for what they had done. Elena collected the money and the empty plates. She felt tired. Her whole body ached, not from physical pain, but from the pain of being disrespected. That night, when Elena finished her shift at 11 o'clock, she was still thinking about what had happened. She sat in the staff room and waited for her husband to pick her up. She had not told him yet about the accident. She was not sure why. Maybe she was ashamed, even though nothing was her fault. When Marco arrived, he looked at Elena's face. He could see something was wrong. She looked sad and tired in a way that was different from just working hard all day. "What is wrong?" he asked simply. Marco was a man of few words. He did not talk much, but when he did, people listened. Elena told him everything. She told him about the men, about Vincent, about the Coca-Cola. She told him how they had laughed at her and made her feel small. As she talked, she noticed Marco's jaw became tight. His eyes became hard and cold in a way she had never seen before, but he did not yell. He did not get angry. He just sat there and listened. When she finished talking, he took her hand and said only a few words. "This will not happen again," he said quietly. Elena did not know what he meant by that. She did not know what her husband could do. She only knew that his voice sounded different when he said it. It sounded like a promise. It sounded like a threat. They drove home in silence. Elena watched the city lights pass by the window. She did not know that her life was about to change. She did not know that the men who had laughed at her would soon understand what happens when you disrespect the wrong person's wife. Marco had always been quiet. This was one of the things Elena loved about him. In a world that was loud and full of noise, Marco was calm and peaceful. When they had met 5 years ago at the grocery store, he had only said 3 words to her. "You dropped your wallet." Elena had turned around, surprised, and saw him holding her brown leather wallet. They had talked for an hour in that grocery store. Since that day, they had been together. Elena knew that her husband was involved in business. She knew this because sometimes he came home late at night, and sometimes men came to their apartment in expensive cars. But Marco kept this part of his life away from her. He had made it very clear from the beginning of their relationship that what he did was not something for her to worry about. "I protect you by keeping you away from my world," he had told her once. "The less you know, the safer you are." Elena had accepted this. She loved Marco and she trusted him. He was always kind to her. He gave her money when she needed it. He brought her flowers on their anniversary. He cooked dinner for her on the nights when she was too tired from work. He was a good man to her, even if she did not understand everything about his life. But that night, after Elena told him about what happened at the restaurant, something changed in Marco's eyes. For the first time, Elena saw the side of him that he had always kept hidden. She saw the man who was not a husband but something else, something darker, something dangerous. The next morning, Marco was already gone when Elena woke up. He had left early before sunrise. Elena went to work and tried to act normal. But all day she thought about the look in Marco's eyes. She thought about his words. "This will not happen again." Marco was in a small office on the other side of the city. The office was above a restaurant that belonged to a man named Don Salvatore. Don Salvatore was the head of a large organization. Marco worked for Don Salvatore, and Marco was very good at his job. People respected Marco because he was smart and careful. He never made mistakes. "I need you to find some men," Marco told Don Salvatore. He explained what the men looked like and where they worked. He told Don Salvatore about the restaurant where they had gone. "I need to know everything about them." Don Salvatore looked at Marco. Don Salvatore was an old man, but his eyes were still sharp and intelligent. He had known Marco since Marco was young. He knew that Marco was not a man who asked for help very often. "Is this important?" Don Salvatore asked. "Yes," Marco said simply. "Very important." Don Salvatore made a phone call. Within 2 hours, Marco had a complete list. The names were Vincent DeMarco, Tony Rossi, Daniel Feldman, Michael Chen, and James Williams. Marco had pictures of them. He had their addresses. He had information about their businesses, their families, their secrets. But Marco did not tell Elena any of this. When he came home that night, he looked the same as always. He cooked dinner. He asked her about her day. He was gentle and kind, but Elena could see something was different. There was a quiet power in the way he moved now. There was a hardness in his eyes that had not been there before. 3 days passed. Elena went to work at the restaurant. She served other customers. She tried not to think about Vincent and his friends, but every shift she was afraid they would come back. She was afraid of what they might do next. Then one night, Marco brought home a newspaper. He showed it to Elena. There was a story about Vincent DeMarco. The story said that the police were investigating Vincent's real estate business. They said that many of his buildings did not follow the building codes. They said that some of his buildings were not safe for people to live in. The story said that Vincent was being investigated, and there might be criminal charges. Elena read the story, and she understood. Somehow Marco had done this. She did not know how. She did not know what her husband had done or who he had called. But she knew that her husband had made this happen. She looked at Marco, and he looked back at her without saying anything. His look said, "Do you see? This is what I can do for you. This is what happens to people who hurt you." Elena felt confused. She felt grateful and scared at the same time. She loved that her husband wanted to protect her. But she was also afraid of the power he had. She was afraid of the man she had married. "What did you do?" she asked him quietly. "I made a phone call," Marco said. He was eating dinner calmly, as if they were talking about the weather. "I told someone I knew about Vincent's business. That is all. I did not lie. Everything in that newspaper is true. The police would have found out eventually. I just made sure they found out sooner." Elena did not answer. She was not sure if this was better or worse than what she had imagined. The thought that Marco could have someone arrested just by making a phone call was almost impossible to believe. But it was real. It was happening. Over the next week, more news came. Another man from the table, Tony Rossi, was involved in a scandal. Pictures came out showing him with a woman who was not his wife. His wife was very angry. She was planning to leave him. His children were upset. His business was suffering because his partners did not want to work with him anymore. Elena did not know that Marco had sent these pictures to newspapers. She did not know that Marco had told Tony's wife about the affair. But she could guess. She could feel it in her bones that her husband was doing these things. Marco had said he would protect her. But this was not protection. This was something bigger. This was power. This was revenge. Elena sat with Marco on their couch and she asked him the question she was most afraid to ask. "Who are you?" she said quietly. Marco took her hand. He looked at her with sad eyes. "I am your husband," he said, "but I am also many other things. Things I have kept away from you to keep you safe. But when someone hurts you, I cannot stay quiet. I cannot be just your husband anymore. I have to be what I am. I have to be what I was born to be." Elena squeezed his hand and she began to understand that the man she loved was more powerful and more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Marcus Donetti was a private investigator. He had worked for many people in the city, but his most important client was Marco. Marco called him at 9 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday. "I need complete information on 5 men," Marco said over the phone. "I need to know everything." Marcus understood what everything meant. It meant their deepest secrets. It meant their weaknesses. It meant anything that could be used against them if necessary. Within 48 hours, Marcus had completed his investigation. He came to Marco's office with a thick folder. Inside were pictures, documents, and written reports. Every piece of information was carefully organized. "Vincent DeMarco," Marcus said, reading from the folder. "Age 42. He owns a real estate company. But he is not successful because he is good at business. He is successful because he pays people to look the other way. He has paid building inspectors, safety officials, and politicians. His buildings are constructed cheaply and dangerously. I have found documents that show this. I have found emails between him and city officials. All of this is illegal." Marco listened carefully. He did not interrupt. "Tony Rossi," Marcus continued. "Age 38. He is married, but he has had many affairs. I have pictures of him with 3 different women. His wife does not know. His business partners do not know. But his business is already failing. He spends company money on hotels and restaurants for his dates. His partners are already suspicious." Marcus turned the page. "Daniel Feldman. Age 40. He has money, but he did not earn it honestly. He has stolen from investors. He has lied about his qualifications. He has never finished college, but he tells everyone he has a degree from Harvard. If anyone investigated him carefully, they would find that he is a complete fraud." Michael Chen, Marcus read. Age 35. He is friends with the city mayor. He has helped the mayor make illegal deals in exchange for business contracts. I have found evidence. If this becomes public, both men will be destroyed. James Williams, Marcus finished. Age 44. He has a problem with gambling. He has debts with very dangerous people. He owes $300,000 to loan sharks. He has been stealing from his company to pay his debts. If his company finds out, he will go to prison. Marco studied each piece of information carefully. He did not show emotion. He simply took the folder and paid Marcus a large amount of money in cash. "This information," Marco said quietly, "will it hold up if people investigate?" "Yes," Marcus said. "Everything is real. Everything can be proven. If the right people know these facts, there will be consequences." Marco nodded. He understood completely. Over the next 2 weeks, Marco made many phone calls. He did not make them from his home or his office. He used different phones that could not be traced. Each phone call was short and simple. To a journalist he knew. There is a real estate developer named Vincent DeMarco. His buildings are not safe. Check the building department records. To a detective he knew. A man named James Williams is stealing from his company. He is also borrowing money from criminals. To a businessman he knew. Tony Rossi is destroying his company with his affairs. His wife should know the truth. To a politician he knew. Michael Chen and the mayor have made illegal deals together. You should investigate. To a lawyer he knew. Daniel Feldman is a fraud. His entire career is built on lies. Each call was made to someone who had reason to look into these matters. Each call simply gave them a starting point. Marco did not do anything illegal himself. He only told people the truth. The rest was up to them. Marco was very clever about this. He knew that if he acted too quickly or too openly, people would know that he was involved. So instead he waited. He let things happen slowly. He let different people discover the truth at different times. When news of Vincent's building code violations came out, it seemed like a normal investigation. When Tony's affairs became public, it seemed like bad luck. When Daniel Feldman's fraud was discovered, it seemed like a coincidence. When Michael Chen's illegal deals were exposed, it seemed like a normal scandal. When James Williams was arrested for theft and dealing with criminals, it seemed like justice. But Elena understood. She read the newspaper stories every day and she understood. Her husband was taking his revenge slowly and carefully. He was not hurting these men physically. He was destroying their lives piece by piece. One night, Elena asked Marco to sit with her and explain exactly what he had done. I did nothing illegal, Marco said. He was very clear about this. I only told people what they needed to know. I only gave information to people who had reason to investigate. I did not break any laws. But you planned this, Elena said. You knew what would happen. Yes, Marco admitted. I planned it. But I did not force anything to happen. All of this was already true about these men. Their sins were real. I only made sure that the right people knew about them. I only made sure that they could not hide anymore. Elena thought about this. She thought about Vincent laughing while Coca-Cola soaked her uniform. She thought about how he had felt no shame, no guilt, no pity for her. Now Vincent's life was being destroyed by his own actions, by his own crimes. Marco had simply made sure that he could not escape from the consequences of those crimes. Is this justice? Elena asked. Marco looked at her for a long time before answering. No, he said finally. Justice is what courts do. This is something else. This is making sure that people understand that their actions have consequences. This is showing people that they cannot hurt others without cost. This is protection. This is power. But is it justice? I do not know. I only know that these men hurt my wife, and now they will understand what that means. Elena laid her head on her husband's shoulder. She did not know if what he was doing was right or wrong, but she knew that he loved her. She knew that he would always protect her, and sometimes that was enough. Vincent DeMarco sat in his lawyer's office, his face pale and his hands shaking. The lawyer was telling him things he did not want to hear. The building violations are real, the lawyer said. Very real. The police have found multiple problems in your buildings. People could have died. The city is filing criminal charges. You are looking at least 5 years in prison. Vincent felt sick. 2 weeks ago, his life had been perfect. He had money, power, and respect. He had laughed with his friends at a restaurant while dumping Coca-Cola on a waitress. Now everything was falling apart. How did this happen? Vincent asked. Why now? These buildings have been standing for years. The lawyer shrugged. Someone reported you. Someone gave the building department a very detailed list of violations. They investigated and found everything was true. Once the investigation started, everything else followed. Vincent knew the truth. Something had happened. Someone was making this happen. But he could not prove it. He could not even say his suspicions out loud because he would sound crazy. Tony Rossi was at home when his wife found out about his affairs. She found pictures on the internet. Terrible, embarrassing pictures. She found messages between him and the women he had been seeing. She found hotel receipts. Everything was there, exposed to the world. She threw his clothes out of the house. She called her lawyer. She told him that she was taking their children and leaving. She told him that she wanted half of everything. Who did this? Tony screamed at anyone who would listen. Who took these pictures? Who posted them? But no one knew. Or if they knew, they were not telling him. Daniel Feldman's fraud was discovered when a reporter started investigating his background. The reporter asked simple questions. Did he really go to Harvard? Did he really have a degree in business? When Feldman could not prove these things, the reporter kept digging. Then the reporter found that Feldman had never even applied to Harvard. He had simply lied. He had told investors that he had an education he did not have. He had told people he had experience he did not have. Everything about him was a lie. The news story about Feldman's fraud led to more investigations. Investors who had given him money wanted it back. Lawyers got involved. Lawsuits began. Daniel Feldman's entire career collapsed because he was exposed as a fake. Michael Chen and the mayor were exposed together. A newspaper received documents showing their illegal deals. The documents were detailed and complete. They showed exactly how the two men had broken the law. The mayor had given Michael Chen business contracts that should have gone to other companies. In exchange, Michael Chen had paid the mayor bribes. It was clear corruption. It was clear crime. Both men denied everything at first, but the documents were real. The evidence was real. Investigators began their work. The mayor announced that he would not run for office again. He hired expensive lawyers. The scandal consumed the local news. James Williams was arrested by the police. They came to his office with a warrant. They took his files and his computer. They discovered that he had been stealing from his company for 2 years. They also found his connections to loan sharks. They found the threats that the criminals had made against him. They found his desperation. James was taken to jail. He sat in a holding cell and did not understand how his life had come to this point. A few days ago, he was a successful businessman. Now he was in prison waiting for trial. These things did not happen all at once. They happened over weeks and months. First, Vincent was arrested. Then Tony's wife left him. Then Daniel's fraud was exposed. Then the mayor's corruption became public. Then James was arrested. Each event seemed separate. Each event seemed like it was just bad luck or normal consequences. But to the men who were experiencing them, there was a clear pattern. Vincent sat with Tony and Daniel and Michael one night. They met in a private place away from the public. They were all scared and confused. They were all trying to understand what was happening. Someone is doing this to us, Vincent said. I know it. Someone is taking revenge on us. For what? Daniel asked. Why would someone do this? None of them wanted to say it. None of them wanted to admit that they had done something that could cause such revenge. They had thrown Coca-Cola on a waitress. It seemed so small. It seemed like nothing. But now it felt like it meant everything. We have to find out who, Michael said. We have to find this person and stop them. But they could not find anyone. They could not prove that anyone had done anything to them. All they knew was that their lives were falling apart. All they knew was that things they thought they had hidden were now exposed. Things they thought were safe were now dangerous. They tried to hire private investigators. They tried to hire lawyers. They tried to fight back. But there was nothing to fight. There was no evidence of a crime. There was nothing that pointed to any one person. Vincent began to think that maybe the waitress's husband was involved. He started asking questions about the waitress. He learned her name was Elena. He learned that she was married to a man named Marco. He learned that Marco was involved in something dark and dangerous. He learned that Marco had connections to criminals. Vincent told the others what he had discovered. The waitress, he said. It was the waitress. Her husband is doing this to us, but what could they do? They could not go to the police and say that they thought a criminal was taking revenge on them. The police would want to know why someone would take revenge. They would want to know what they had done. And then they would have to admit that they had deliberately hurt a waitress just for fun, so the men stayed quiet. They suffered through their problems. They watched as their lives fell apart one piece at a time. Elena watched the news every night. She saw Vincent arrested. She saw Tony's marriage destroyed. She saw Daniel exposed as a fraud. She saw Michael's corruption made public. She saw James in prison. And she knew that her husband had made all of this happen. She was not sure how to feel. Part of her was glad. These men deserved punishment. They had hurt her. They had humiliated her. They had made her feel small. But another part of her was afraid. She was afraid of her husband's power. She was afraid of what he was capable of. She was afraid of the man she loved. When she looked at Marco, she saw a man who loved her very much. But she also saw a man who could destroy people without them ever knowing who was destroying them. She saw a man who could take revenge in ways that were perfect and invisible. She loved him. But she was also a little bit afraid of him now. And that fear would never completely go away. 3 months had passed since the night when Elena told Marco about the Coca-Cola incident. 3 months had passed since Vincent DeMarco's life started to fall apart. 3 months had passed since Tony, Daniel, Michael, and James began to understand that their actions had consequences. Elena and Marco sat on their couch one evening. Outside, the sun was setting and the sky turned orange and pink. Marco held Elena's hand. They had not spoken about what had happened in a long time. They had tried to move on. They had tried to go back to normal. But normal did not exist anymore. "I need to ask you something," Elena said. She had been thinking about this question for weeks. "I need you to tell me the truth." Marco looked at her with kind eyes. He nodded. "Did you have anything to do with what happened to those men?" Elena asked. Marco was quiet for a long time. He did not try to hide the truth. He did not try to lie to her. "Yes," he said finally. "I did have something to do with it. But not in the way you might think." Elena waited for him to continue. "Those men committed crimes," Marco said. "Vincent built buildings that were unsafe. Tony stole from his business partners. Daniel lied about his credentials. Michael and the mayor made illegal deals. James stole from his company and associated with criminals. All of these things were true before I did anything." "But you made sure people knew about it," Elena said. "Yes," Marco admitted. "I made sure that the people who should know about it knew about it. I told a journalist about Vincent. I told a detective about James. I made sure that investigations happened. But I did not break any laws. I only told the truth to people who had the power to do something about it." Elena understood what he was saying. He was telling her that he had not done anything wrong technically, but he had done something wrong morally. He had used his power to take revenge. He had used his connections to punish people. "Do you regret it?" Elena asked. Marco thought about this question very carefully. "No," he said. "I do not regret it. Those men hurt you. They disrespected you. They made you feel small and ashamed for no reason. They threw Coca-Cola on you and laughed. They thought there would be no consequences for their actions. I made sure they understood that there would be consequences. I protected you. By destroying their lives," Elena said. "By letting them face the consequences of their own actions," Marco corrected. "I did not destroy their lives. They destroyed their own lives by committing crimes, by lying, by cheating, by hurting people. I only made sure they could not hide from it." Elena looked at the man she loved. She saw his face in the orange light of the sunset. She saw the strength in his jaw, the intelligence in his eyes. She saw the man who had cooked her dinner and brought her flowers. She also saw the man who could contact people who made criminal investigations happen. She saw the man who could make newspaper reporters pay attention to stories. She saw the man with power over other people's lives. "I am afraid of you sometimes," Elena said quietly. Marco did not look surprised. He had known this all along. "I know," he said. "That is okay. It is good that you are afraid. Fear means you understand what I am capable of. Fear means you will not do things that would force me to use that power against you." "That is not comfort," Elena said. "It is not meant to be comfort," Marco said. "It is meant to be truth. I love you. I will always protect you. But I will also always do what is necessary to protect you. If that frightens you, I understand. But I will not apologize for it." Elena squeezed his hand. She was not sure if she forgave him for what he had done. She was not sure if she wanted to forgive him. But she loved him. That was the most important thing. She loved him, even though she was afraid of him. She loved him even though she knew what he was capable of. "What happens now?" Elena asked. "Now we live our lives," Marco said. "We go back to normal. You go to work at the restaurant. I do my business. We have dinner together. We go to sleep, we wake up. We live. Will you do this again?" Elena asked. "Will you take revenge on someone else if they hurt me?" Marco looked at her for a long time. "I will do whatever is necessary to protect you," he said. "If someone hurts you, I will respond. That is who I am. That is what I do. That is how I show love." Elena understood. She understood that she had married a man who was not like other men. She had married a man with power. She had married a man who lived in darkness. But he had brought her into his light. He had shown her that he valued her enough to destroy other people for her. It was not a normal way to show love. But it was real. It was powerful. It was complete. Over the following weeks, life returned to something that looked like normal. Vincent DeMarco went to prison. Tony Rossi's marriage ended in divorce. Daniel Feldman lost all his money in lawsuits. Michael Chen and the mayor both faced federal investigations. James Williams was in jail waiting for trial. The newspaper never found out who had given them the tips about these men. The police never traced the anonymous calls. The evidence was always there, but no one knew how it had been discovered. Elena went back to Marcello's restaurant. She served customers. She received tips. She worked hard. And no one ever treated her the way that Vincent and his friends had treated her. People knew somehow that Elena was different. People knew somehow that Elena was protected. Marco and Elena lived in a small apartment in the city. They lived a quiet life. To anyone who looked at them, they seemed like a normal couple. They went to movies. They went to dinner. They spent time together, but Elena knew the truth. She knew who her husband really was. She knew that he was a man who could contact the right people. She knew that he was a man with connections to the criminal underworld. She knew that he was a man who would do anything to protect the people he loved. And somewhere deep inside, Elena was glad that the men had thrown Coca-Cola on her. Because if they had not done that, she would never have learned how powerful her husband was. She would never have understood how completely he would protect her. She loved him. She was afraid of him. But she was also grateful to him, and that was their story. That was how Elena learned that her quiet, kind husband was something else entirely. That was how Elena learned that actions have consequences. That was how Elena learned that the world is more complicated and more dangerous than most people know. In the city, life continued. People made choices. People committed crimes. People hurt other people. But sometimes, if you were lucky, someone loved you enough to make sure that you would not suffer alone. Someone loved you enough to take revenge on your behalf. Someone loved you enough to risk everything for you. That was Marco and Elena's love story. It was not a story you would read in books. It was not a love story for gentle people. But it was real, and it was powerful, and it was theirs. And the Coca-Cola incident was never spoken of again. Not because people forgot about it, but because everyone who had been involved understood that they had paid the price for their actions. They had learned that every action has a consequence. They had learned that the world does not forgive cruelty. They had learned that somewhere someone was always watching. Someone was always keeping score.